Before I begin, I'd like to ask you to settle in, perhaps grab a cup of tea, because this is a story I've held close for a while now. It's about a lesson learned late in life, a lesson about boundaries and self-worth, even with those you love the most. My daughter, my only child, Sarah, refused to help me shower when I needed her most. She said some things that cut deeper than any surgeon's scalpel. So, I did something some might find shocking. I helped myself to her savings. This is the story of how I reclaimed more than just money. I reclaimed myself. Let me know in the comments if you've ever faced a moment where you had to choose between your dignity and a relationship you cherished. And if you're new here, do consider subscribing for more stories about life's unexpected turns. The old house sighed around me most days, a symphony of creaks and groans that echoed the aches in my own 78-year-old bones. Arthritis had claimed my hands years ago, turning them into gnarled claws that struggled with buttons and jars, and more recently, a fall had left me with a hip that protested every movement. I, Martha, who had once juggled 2 jobs, a household, and a spirited young daughter all on my own, now found myself needing help with the simplest, most private of tasks. The indignity of it was a bitter pill, swallowed daily with my morning medications. This house, my home for over 50 years, had witnessed my life unfold. It had seen me pace the floors with a colicky baby Sarah, seen me bake countless birthday cakes, seen me cry silently into my pillow after my husband, Tom, passed too young, leaving me to raise our girl alone. Every corner held a memory, a whisper of laughter, or a shadow of sorrow. Sarah, now 42, lived with me. She'd moved back in after her last relationship soured, her job in marketing offering flexibility but, according to her, never quite enough income to match her aspirations. I'd been relieved at first, thinking company would be nice, a helping hand welcome. But Sarah's presence had slowly morphed from comfort to a subtle, pervasive drain. She was a queen of the distracted nod, her face more often illuminated by the glow of her phone than by any genuine engagement with me. Her sighs were frequent, her patience thin, especially when my needs interrupted her scrolling or her plans. I remembered pouring every spare penny, every ounce of my energy, into her. I gave up a promotion once because it would have meant longer hours away from her. I cashed in my own small inheritance for my mother, not for a comfortable retirement for myself, but for the down payment on Sarah's first trendy apartment, the one she'd lost along with the boyfriend. I'd foregone holidays, new clothes, even dental work at times, to ensure she had the best education, the prettiest dresses, the experiences I'd never had. "You deserve the world, my love," I used to tell her, and I'd meant it. I suppose, somewhere along the line, she'd started to believe that the world, or at least my small corner of it, was indeed hers for the taking, with very little required in return. The early signs had been there, little flickers of entitlement. The expectation that I'd always cover dinner if we went out, the way she'd borrow money with no mention of repayment, the casual dismissal of my opinions. I'd brush them off, telling myself it was just her way, that she was stressed, that she loved me underneath it all. Hope is a stubborn thing. But now, in the twilight of my years, when the sacrifices of the past should have perhaps yielded a little tenderness, a little care, I felt increasingly like an old piece of furniture, still there, but largely ignored, an inconvenience. The daily cuts were small, the way she'd leave her dirty dishes for me to struggle with, the impatience in her voice if I asked her to repeat something, the way she never asked about my doctor's appointments unless it interfered with her schedule. Each one was a tiny pinprick, but over time, they'd left my heart feeling like a sieve. My world had shrunk to these 4 walls, and within them, I was becoming a ghost in my own life, waiting for a spark of the daughter I remembered, the one whose hand I used to hold. The day it all shattered began like any other. The sun, a pale winter wafer, cast long shadows across my bedroom floor. My hip throbbed with a vengeance, a dull, insistent drumbeat that promised a difficult day. The thought of navigating the bathroom, of the simple act of showering, filled me with a familiar dread. The tiles were cold and slick, the grab bars awkwardly placed, and the fear of another fall was a constant companion. I'd managed precariously for a few days since my last bad turn, but today, the weakness in my legs felt more pronounced. I needed help. Sarah was in the kitchen. I could hear the clatter of her making a smoothie, the whir of the blender a jarring counterpoint to the quiet anxiety building in my chest. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Asking for help, especially for something so personal, felt like chipping away at the last vestiges of my independence. I shuffled to the kitchen doorway, leaning heavily on my cane. "Sarah, dear," I began, my voice softer than I intended. She didn't look up from her phone, which was propped against the fruit bowl, some influencer chattering away on the screen. She offered, scrolling with her thumb. I was wondering if you could possibly help me with my shower this morning? My hip is particularly bad, and I'm a bit worried about slipping. The request hung in the air, heavy and vulnerable. Sarah finally looked up, her expression shifting from distraction to a visible annoyance that tightened her lips. "Seriously, Mom?" she said, her voice edged with impatience. "I'm in the middle of something, and I have a video call in like an hour. Can it wait?" I felt a flush creep up my neck. "Well, no, dear, I really feel I need to freshen up." "It won't take long," she sighed, a dramatic exhalation that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. She put her phone down with a deliberate slowness that felt like a reprimand. "You know, I have a life too. I can't just drop everything for every little thing." Her eyes, the same blue eyes I'd gazed into with such love when she was a baby, now held a cold, dismissive light. "I'm not your servant, Mother," those words. "I'm not your servant, Mother." They landed like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. A servant? After all I'd done, all I'd been? The shame was a burning wave, closely followed by a chilling iciness. I think I mumbled something, an apology perhaps, though what I was apologizing for, I couldn't say. I just wanted to retreat, to disappear. She picked up her phone again, already absorbed, the matter clearly dismissed from her mind. I turned, slowly, and made my way back to the bathroom, the echo of her words a cruel taunt. Alone, I stared at the shower, the porcelain and chrome gleaming mockingly. I tried. Oh, how I tried. My hands trembled as I reached for the taps, my body stiff with fear and humiliation. I managed to get in, the warm water offering a brief, deceptive comfort. But then, reaching for the soap, my foot skidded. Time seemed to slow. I flailed, my hand scrabbling for a hold, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't fall. Not completely, but I wrenched my already sore hip and banged my elbow hard against the tiles, the pain a sharp, sickening jolt. Tears welled, hot and bitter. Tears of pain, yes, but more so of fury and a profound, desolate loneliness. I was less than her schedule, less than her phone. I was an obligation, an irritant. "I'm not your servant," the phrase replayed, over and over, each repetition stripping away another layer of the love and trust I'd held onto for so long. That shower, the one I eventually agonizingly finished, washed away more than just grime. It washed away the last of my illusions about my daughter. That night, sleep was a cruel mirage, always receding as I reached for it. Each time I closed my eyes, Sarah's face, etched with impatience, floated before me. Her words, "I'm not your servant, Mother," echoed in the hollow chambers of my heart, each syllable a fresh stab. My hip ached with a renewed intensity, a physical manifestation of the emotional agony twisting inside me. The physical pain I could almost manage. It was the pain of her dismissal, her utter lack of compassion, that was unbearable. I lay there, staring into the darkness, and the past came flooding back, not as gentle nostalgia, but as a series of stark, painful contrasts. I saw myself, a young widow, working double shifts as a waitress, the smell of stale coffee and fried food clinging to my clothes, just to make sure Sarah had new shoes for school and ballet lessons. I remembered her 5th birthday, how I'd stayed up all night baking a princess castle cake, my fingers raw and eyes gritty with fatigue, just to see her face light up. I remembered nursing her through a terrible bout of pneumonia, holding her small, feverish body, terrified I might lose her, praying for her recovery while my own health took a back seat. And then, the more recent sacrifices. The money I'd lent her for her online boutique, venture that never materialized, the bills I'd quietly covered when she was between jobs, the way I'd rearranged my own meager social life to accommodate her comings and goings. Each memory was a fresh indictment of her present cruelty. How could the child I had poured my entire existence into now look at me with such coldness, such disregard? The shame I'd felt earlier in the bathroom began to curdle into a slow-burning anger. I wasn't just hurt, I was profoundly, deeply offended. The realization that she truly saw me as a burden, an obstacle in her oh-so-important life, settled in my soul like a shard of ice. In the days that followed, Sarah behaved as if nothing had happened. There was no apology, no flicker of remorse in her eyes. She breezed in and out, chattering on her phone about her friends, her online yoga classes, her search for the perfect avocado. If she noticed my pained movements or my silence, she gave no sign. It was this obliviousness, this casual continuation of her self-absorbed life, that cemented my growing disillusionment. One afternoon, I was resting on the sofa, the television murmuring a forgotten drama, when I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. Her voice, usually so carefully modulated for her networking calls, was sharp, complaining. Such a drag, honestly. I can barely get any work done. It's like constant interruptions. And her medical bills are piling up. I don't know how I'm supposed to save anything with all this going on. My blood ran cold. So that was it. I was a financial drain, a nuisance. My pain, my needs, were just inconvenient expenses on her ledger. The thought, chilling and stark, settled in. Was she just waiting for me to disappear? For the burden to be lifted? The thought was monstrous, yet it whispered with a terrible logic, explaining the casual cruelty, the dismissiveness. She wasn't just thoughtless. There was a callousness there, a selfishness so profound it felt like a betrayal of our very blood. The daughter I loved, the one I'd sacrificed everything for, didn't exist anymore, if she ever truly had. In her place was a stranger, a woman whose priorities were so skewed, so self-centered, that her own mother's suffering was just an entry in her mental accounting of grievances. The ice shard in my soul began to feel less like a wound and more like a core of something hard and resolute. The grief was still there, a heavy cloak, but underneath it, a different emotion was stirring, a steely determination. She would not break me. I had weathered too many storms in my life to be capsized by this one. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was a slow dawning, like the sun finally breaking through after a long, bitter storm. For days, I replayed Sarah's words, her actions, the overheard phone call. Each recollection chipped away at the image I'd held of her, the loving daughter I'd believed was just temporarily lost in the struggles of modern life. The truth, when it finally settled, was stark and ugly. She saw me as an encumbrance, a tiresome responsibility whose primary value lay in what I could provide, or what she might eventually inherit. The turning point, the moment my sorrow began to transmute into a cold, clear resolve, came during a particularly bleak afternoon. I was looking through an old photo album, my gnarled fingers tracing the smiling faces of a younger me, a baby Sarah, my late husband Tom. There was a photo of me, probably in my late 30s, standing proudly in front of the small bakery I dreamed of opening, a dream I'd shelved to pay for Sarah's college tuition. I remembered the fire I'd had then, the resilience. I wasn't just Mom. I was Martha, a woman who had faced down widowhood, financial hardship, and loneliness, and had always found a way. Where had that woman gone? Had I allowed myself to become so diminished in Sarah's eyes that I'd started to believe her assessment of me? No, I whispered to the faded photograph. No more. A flicker of that old fire ignited within me. I was not finished. I was not just a burden to be tolerated. And Sarah, my daughter, for all her fashionable clothes and important phone calls, had a serious misapprehension about who I was and what I was capable of. It was then that the first tentative idea began to form. It wasn't about revenge, not in the petty sense. It was about justice, about self-preservation, about teaching a lesson that, clearly, life had failed to impart to Sarah thus far. My mind, which had felt so clouded by grief and pain, began to clear. I started thinking about practicalities. I had my small pension, Tom's survivor benefits, and the house, of course, though it needed repairs I couldn't afford. Sarah often complained about her own finances, how she was struggling to save, how expensive everything was. Yet, I'd see new packages arriving for her, clothes and gadgets she certainly didn't need. Where was her money really going? And then a memory surfaced, hazy at first, then sharpening into focus. Years ago, when Sarah had just turned 18 and was about to head off to university, I'd taken her to my bank. We'd opened a joint savings account. The idea had been to deposit a lump sum, a significant portion of my own meager savings back then, as a safety net for her, something for a real emergency, or perhaps a deposit on a future home. I was the primary account holder, I recalled, but she had full access. We'd both largely forgotten about it, or so I thought. I hadn't touched it in decades. What had become of it? A strange sort of excitement, cold and purposeful, began to thrum through me. Had Sarah remembered it? Was she using it? The thought that she might be, all while complaining about her finances and my expenses, was a bitter pill. But it also presented an opportunity. I helped myself to her savings, the future me whispered. But what if those savings were, in essence, mine to begin with, or at least jointly ours, and she had simply co-opted them? The idea took root. I would investigate. I would find out. The fog of my despair was lifting, replaced by a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming my agency. The plan, if it could even be called that in its nascent stage, was a fragile thing, a secret ember I carefully cupped in my hands, shielding it from the winds of doubt and Sarah's oblivious presence. My first step was to confirm the existence and status of that old joint account. The thought of Sarah, with her casual cruelty and endless complaints about money, possibly having access to a forgotten nest egg that I had originally funded, filled me with a grim determination. I needed to be careful, discreet. Sarah was sharp when it came to her own interests, and any hint that I was prying into financial matters might make her suspicious. I started by rummaging through old boxes in the attic, a task my hip protested vehemently against, but the burgeoning sense of purpose overrode the pain. Under a pile of Sarah's old school reports and my late husband's dusty collection of wartime biographies, I found a thin, faded bank passbook from a local building society that had long since been taken over by one of the high street giants. The account number was there, along with both our names, Martha J. Ellison and Sarah L. Ellison. The last entry was a deposit I'd made, dated nearly 25 years ago. A substantial sum for me back then, a king's ransom. My heart hammered. The next step was the bank. I couldn't just walk in. Sarah often knew my general whereabouts, and a sudden, unexplained trip to a bank I didn't usually frequent might raise questions. I waited for a day when she announced she'd be out for most of the afternoon, meeting a friend for lunch, and then some essential shopping. "Don't wait up for me to make you lunch, Mom," she called out, already halfway out the door. The casual assumption that I would, that my day revolved around her needs, added another small log to my simmering fire. Once she was gone, I called the bank's general inquiry line, my voice quavering slightly as I explained I was trying to trace an old account. I gave them the details from the passbook. The customer service agent was polite but cautious, asking security questions I struggled to answer accurately after so many years. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she confirmed it. "Yes, Mrs. Ellison, the account is still active." "It's a joint instant access savings account," my breath caught. "And could you tell me, as a joint account holder, do I have full access to the funds?" "Yes, ma'am," she replied. "Either named party can make withdrawals or close the account." Then came the crucial question. "Could you possibly tell me the current balance?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause, the click of keys. "Certainly. The current balance is £26,472.18. I nearly dropped the phone. £26,000. It was a fortune to me. far more than the initial sum I'd deposited. So, Sarah had known about it. She must have been adding to it, or perhaps it had accrued significant interest over the years untouched. Or worse, was she using it as a secret slush fund, complaining of poverty while this sum sat there? A new, colder anger surfaced. If she had access to that kind of money, her complaints about my medical bills and her general financial woes were not just selfish, they were deceitful. She was playing me for a fool. I thanked the agent, my mind racing. I needed more information. How active had it been? The bank couldn't tell me detailed transaction histories over the phone without more security, but the very existence of such a sum, unknown to me but clearly known to her, was a revelation. My resolve hardened. This wasn't just about teaching her a lesson anymore. It was about securing my own future, a future where I wasn't dependent on her begrudging charity. I started to plan. I'd need to visit the branch, prove my identity. I'd need to decide what to do with the money. The thought of taking it, of the look on Sarah's face when she found out, sent a shiver down my spine. Partly fear, partly a grim satisfaction. I began to practice my demeanor around Sarah, feigning a little more confusion, leaning more heavily on my cane, asking her to repeat things. If she thought I was declining, becoming more helpless, she'd be less likely to suspect me of any clandestine activity. It was a demeaning charade, but a necessary one. The old Martha, the fighter, was re-emerging, albeit cloaked in a guise of frailty. She thought I was finished, a relic of a bygone era. She had no idea. The weight of my secret, the burgeoning plan, felt both heavy and invigorating. I knew I couldn't, or rather shouldn't, navigate this entirely alone. While my resolve was strong, a sounding board, a voice of reason and support, would be invaluable. There was only one person I trusted enough: Brenda. Brenda O'Malley had been my friend for over 60 years, since we were giggling schoolgirls sharing secrets and dreams. Now a sprightly widow herself, with a mind as sharp as a box of new pins and a no-nonsense attitude that had seen her through her own share of life's trials, Brenda was the rock I needed. I called her, my voice low, and asked if I could visit. "You sound serious, Martha," she'd said. "Tea and sympathy, or tea and strategy?" "A bit of both, I think," I'd replied, a small smile touching my lips for the first time in what felt like weeks. A few days later, sitting in Brenda's cozy, cluttered living room, a mug of her strong, sweet tea warming my hands, I laid it all out. I started with the shower incident, the brutal finality of Sarah's words. "I'm not your servant, Mother." Brenda listened, her expression growing sterner with every detail. I told her about Sarah's casual cruelty, the overheard phone call, my growing sense of being nothing more than a burden. Brenda just shook her head, her lips pursed. Then, I revealed my discovery. The old joint account, the significant sum Sarah had apparently been nurturing or hiding, all while pleading poverty and resenting my modest needs. When I finished, the silence in the room was thick. Brenda stared into her teacup for a long moment, then looked directly at me, her gaze piercing. That ungrateful, manipulative little... She stopped herself, took a deep breath. "Martha, I am so sorry you've been treated this way. In your own home, by your own daughter." Her sympathy was a balm, but it was her next words that truly fortified me. "So, this account," she said, her voice all business. "You're a joint holder. You have every legal right to access those funds, to take every penny if you choose." "That's what the bank said," I confirmed. "And you know, Brenda, a good portion of the original deposit was money I'd scrimped and saved, money I put there for her future, but as a safety net I still had a stake in." "Exactly." Brenda thumped her mug down on the coaster. "She's been treating it as her private piggy bank, all while making you feel like a millstone around her neck? The sheer audacity. Martha, you're not just entitled to that money. You have a moral obligation to yourself to secure it." We talked for hours. Brenda, ever practical, helped me think through the logistics. "First things first," she said, "you need a new bank account in your sole name. Somewhere Sarah knows nothing about. When you take the money from the joint account, it needs a safe place to land immediately." She also asked the hard questions. "What are you going to do with it, Martha? Beyond teaching Sarah a lesson, I mean, This is a chance for you to improve your own quality of life. Have you thought about proper home care? Maybe even moving somewhere smaller, more manageable, away from her. Her words resonated. The idea of having someone kind and professional to help me, of not having to beg for basic assistance, felt like a distant, almost unimaginable luxury. Moving, that was a bigger step, but the thought of a small, bright apartment, free from the oppressive atmosphere Sarah created, held a certain appeal. And what about Sarah's reaction? Brenda continued, her eyes narrowed in thought. She's going to hit the roof. You need to be prepared for that. Tears, accusations, guilt trips, the whole 9 yards. I know, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm tired of being made to feel guilty for simply existing, for needing what any elderly person might need. She made her choices. Now I'm making mine. Brenda reached across and squeezed my hand. Good for you, Martha. It takes courage. That girl needs a rude awakening, and it seems you're the one to deliver it. By the time I left Brenda's house, the plan was no longer a nebulous idea, but a concrete strategy. I knew which bank I'd use for my new account. I knew I'd withdraw the entire sum from the joint account, leaving not a penny for Sarah to squabble over. I even had a date in mind, the following Tuesday. Sarah had a full-day wellness retreat, booked with a friend. Ridiculously expensive indulgence she'd justified as essential self-care. The irony was not lost on me. While she was off finding her bliss, I'd be securing my own. Brenda's unwavering support had swept away my lingering doubts. This wasn't just about retribution, it was about reclamation. My dignity, my security, my peace of mind. They were all on the line. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt a surge of strength, of the old Martha, ready to fight for herself. Tuesday morning dawned crisp and clear, a perfect autumn day. Sarah was a whirlwind of activity, flitting about in her expensive yoga gear, packing a bag with scented candles, organic snacks, and what looked like a silk eye mask. Don't forget your matcha whisk, darling, her friend shrilled from the car horn outside. Sarah blew me a distracted kiss, more an air current than a gesture of affection. Have a good day, Mom. Try not to overdo it, and then she was gone, leaving behind a faint scent of sandalwood and a profound silence. My heart was a hummingbird in my chest. This was it. I dressed with meticulous care, choosing a smart navy dress I hadn't worn in years, and a string of pearls Tom had given me. They felt like armor. I'd already done the groundwork. The previous week, on the pretext of needing some fresh air, I'd taken a taxi to a different bank in the next town and opened a new savings account in my sole name. The paperwork was tucked securely in my handbag, along with my passport and the old passbook for the joint account. My first stop was the bank branch where the joint account was held. I'd called ahead, making an appointment with a personal banker, saying I needed to discuss an old account. The young woman, Chloe, was polite and efficient. I presented my identification, the passbook. Yes, Mrs. Ellison, I see the account here. What can I do for you today? I'd like to withdraw the full balance, I said, my voice remarkably steady, and closed the account. Chloe's eyebrows flickered upwards for a nanosecond, but she quickly regained her professional composure. Certainly. And where would you like the funds transferred? I provided the details of my new, secret account. There were forms to sign, checks to be made. As Chloe tapped away at her computer, I sat there, a strange calmness settling over me. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was an act of liberation. The ghosts of past sacrifices, of endured disrespect, seemed to hover in the air, then dissipate as the process moved forward. All right, Mrs. Ellison, Chloe finally said, offering a small smile. The funds have been transferred to your new account, and the joint account ending in is now closed. She handed me a confirmation slip. I folded it carefully and placed it in my handbag. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees as I stood up. I thanked Chloe, my voice thick with unshed emotion, and walked out of the bank into the bright sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. My next act was prearranged. From my new account, I had already set up a direct debit. As I traveled home in a taxi, my phone pinged. It was a confirmation email from Care Comfort Home Services. My first weekly payment for a carer, Agnes, had been processed. She was scheduled to start the very next morning for 2 hours each day to help with personal care, light housework, and companionship. The relief of knowing I wouldn't have to beg for help, that a kind, professional pair of hands would be there, was immeasurable. Back in the quiet house, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my armchair. The silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt peaceful. I had taken control. The anticipation of Sarah's discovery was a knot in my stomach, yes, but it was overshadowed by a deep, abiding sense of rightness. I had drawn a line. I had chosen myself. The old Martha, the one who had weathered so many storms, was well and truly back. She'd just been waiting for the opportune moment. Sarah returned late that evening, glowing from her day of mindfulness and rejuvenation, chattering about sound baths and organic juices. She seemed to float into the living room, where I was pretending to read, though my senses were on high alert. "Oh, Mom, you wouldn't believe how amazing it was. I feel like a new woman." She barely glanced at me, already scrolling through photos on her phone. "That's nice, dear," I said, my voice neutral. The next day, Agnes arrived, a cheerful, no-nonsense woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She helped me shower, her assistance gentle and respectful, chatting away about her grandchildren. For the first time in months, I felt truly clean, truly cared for, without a shred of humiliation. Sarah, when she eventually emerged from her room mid-morning, saw Agnes helping me with some light physiotherapy exercises in the living room. Her jaw literally dropped. Who is this?" she stammered, looking from Agnes to me, confusion and suspicion dawning on her face. "This is Agnes, dear," I said calmly. "She's going to be helping me out a few days a week. Helping you? But who's paying for her?" Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I am, Sarah," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. I decided it was time I invested in my own well-being. The penny, however, didn't fully drop for Sarah until later that afternoon. I heard a shriek from her bedroom, followed by the thunder of her footsteps as she stormed into the living room, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic and fury. She was waving her phone erratically. "My money! Where's my money? My savings account. It's empty. It's gone." I put down my knitting, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips, though I kept my expression composed. "Your money, Sarah?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Or are you perhaps referring to the joint account, the one I opened with my money all those years ago as a safety net?" Her face went from pale to a blotchy red. You took it. How could you? That was my emergency fund. My future. An emergency fund you never told me you were actively using, I gather?" I countered, my calm infuriating her further. "An emergency fund that seemed to be quite substantial, despite your constant complaints about having no money, especially when it came to my needs." I leaned forward slightly. "You were so terribly inconvenienced when I asked for a little help with something as basic as a shower, Sarah. You made it quite clear. I'm not your servant, Mother." Well, I took that to heart. I decided I would no longer serve your financial illusions or your sense of entitlement while you treated me with such profound disrespect. Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. But that was thousands. I was saving that. For a house deposit. For my future. "And what about my future, Sarah?" I asked, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel she had never heard before. "The future where I'm not a burden to you? The future where I can afford the care you so clearly resent providing? I've taken steps to secure that future. With funds that, I might remind you, I had every legal right to access." The shock on her face was immense, followed by a dawning, horrified understanding. She had underestimated me. Profoundly. "You taught me a valuable lesson, dear," I continued, picking up my knitting again as if the conversation were a minor interruption. "About self-reliance. It seems I'm a faster learner than you credited me for." The power in the room had shifted, decisively and irrevocably. The servant, it turned out, had staged a quiet, effective coup. Sarah's initial shock quickly morphed into a torrent of incoherent rage. "You can't do this. This is theft." "I'll call the police," she shrieked, her carefully constructed composure shattering like cheap glass. I simply raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead, dear. I'm sure they'll be very interested to learn about a joint bank account, legally accessed by one of the named holders. Perhaps while they're here, we can discuss the concept of financial elder abuse. Your constant complaints about my expenses, while you secretly had access to a considerable sum, might make for an interesting conversation." That stopped her short. The word police died on her lips, replaced by a sputtering indignation. Her face, which had been flushed with anger, now seemed to crumble. The fight went out of her, replaced by a desperate, pleading tone. "But Mom, I needed that money. I had plans. How could you be so cruel?" "Cruel, Sarah?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Was it cruel when I asked for your help, simply to feel human and clean, and you dismissed me as if I were asking for the moon? Was it cruel when you complained about my medical bills while knowing you had that nest egg? You seem to have a very one-sided definition of cruelty." Tears began to stream down her face then. Big, theatrical tears. "But I love you, Mom. I didn't mean it like that. I was stressed. You know how hard things are for me." It was a performance and not a very convincing one. The manipulative tactics that might have once tugged at my heartstrings now felt hollow, transparent. "Love, Sarah," I said, my voice heavy with a sadness that surprised me, "is shown in actions, not just words. And your actions have spoken far louder than any belated declaration." Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Agnes, arriving for her afternoon check-in, a cheerful smile on her face. She bustled in, all efficiency and kindness. "Ready for your exercises, Martha? And I brought that seed cake recipe you asked for." Sarah stared, aghast, as Agnes helped me to my feet, her touch gentle and supportive. The tangible evidence of my newfound independence, funded by the very money Sarah considered hers, was a stark, visual rebuke. Sarah slumped onto the sofa, the fight completely gone, replaced by a look of utter desolation. She watched as Agnes guided me through some simple stretches, her expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The full weight of her miscalculation, of the consequences of her callousness, was clearly settling upon her. She had treated me as an irrelevant, fading burden, and in doing so, had armed me with the resolve to reclaim what was mine, and more importantly, who I was. Later that evening, after Agnes had left, Sarah tried again, her tone softer, more conciliatory. "Mom, we need to talk about this. Maybe we can work something out. I could pay you back a little each month." I shook my head. "There's nothing to work out, Sarah. The money is mine, and I'm using it for my care and my comfort. Something you were unwilling to provide." This isn't a negotiation. The finality in my voice seemed to extinguish her last flicker of hope. She retreated to her room, and a heavy silence descended on the house, broken only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a silence that, for me, was filled with a profound, if somber, sense of relief. The weight I had carried for so long, the weight of her disrespect and my own diminishing self-worth, had finally been lifted. I took a deep breath. It was done. I began to make small changes, using a portion of the funds. I bought a new, orthopedic armchair that didn't make my hips scream. I subscribed to a service that delivered fresh, healthy meals, so I wouldn't have to rely on Sarah's haphazard cooking or struggle myself. I even bought a new set of luxurious bath towels. Small things, perhaps, but each one was an affirmation of my value, my right to comfort and dignity. The weeks that followed settled into a new, surprisingly peaceful rhythm. Agnes became a fixture in my daily life, her cheerful presence a stark contrast to Sarah's sullen resentment. With Agnes's help, I felt stronger, more capable. The simple act of being treated with consistent kindness and respect was transformative. My home, which had started to feel like a gilded cage of neglect, began to feel like my sanctuary again. Sarah, on the other hand, was a ghost in her own life. She drifted through the house, her usual ebullience extinguished. The vibrant outfits were replaced by muted colors, the endless phone calls dwindled. She made a few more half-hearted attempts to discuss the money situation, as she termed it, usually framing it around her own victimhood, her dashed dreams. Each time, I met her pleas with a calm, unwavering firmness. The time for discussion is over, Sarah. You made your priorities clear. Now I am tending to mine. The truth was, the broken bond with my daughter was a source of deep, abiding sorrow. There was an ache in my heart that I knew would likely never fully heal. I mourned the daughter I thought I had raised, the close, loving relationship I had always yearned for in my old age. But that grief was now interwoven with a profound sense of peace and empowerment. I was no longer living at the mercy of her moods, her whims, her casual disregard. I had my dignity back, and that, I was discovering, was worth more than any sum of money. I reconnected with Brenda more regularly. We'd have long chats over tea, and she'd listen patiently as I navigated the complex emotions of my new reality. "You did what you had to do, Martha," she'd say, her voice firm. "She's a grown woman. She'll either learn from this, or she won't. But you are no longer responsible for cushioning her from the consequences of her own choices." One afternoon, Brenda suggested I look into a local seniors activity group she attended. Hesitantly, I agreed. To my surprise, I found myself enjoying the gentle exercise classes, the book club discussions, the simple companionship of people who saw me as Martha, not as Mom the Bird in my world, which had shrunk to the four walls of my house, and the narrow confines of Sarah's tolerance began to expand again. As for Sarah, I heard snippets. She had apparently taken on extra freelance work, was complaining to her friends about being utterly broke. I imagined she had to give up some of her little luxuries, her wellness retreats and designer coffees. It was a harsh lesson, certainly, but one she had brought entirely upon herself. Perhaps, in time, she would understand the deeper injury she had inflicted, the one that went far beyond finances. Or perhaps not. My peace no longer depended on her enlightenment. My focus was on my own well-being, on living the remainder of my years with the respect and comfort I deserved. It wasn't about the money, not really, not in the end. The money was just a tool, a means to an end.
It was about respect.
It was about being seen, truly seen, as a human being with needs and feelings, not an inconvenient footnote in someone else's life. I had taken back not just my savings, but my life, my voice, my self-worth. And that, my friends, is a reclamation of an entirely different order. It's a quiet strength that now resides within me, a knowledge that even when faced with profound disappointment from those we love most, we still have the power to choose ourselves. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy path, but it was a necessary one. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to reclaim your own dignity? Your experiences and wisdom are always so valuable to this community. And if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on future stories. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember your worth.